Hello and welcome to a very, very special NX7062 podcast. I am so glad that you are all here with me today. I have some very special guests, and we are going to be discussing the SAG-AFTRA strike, and more specifically, United We Trek. Before we get started, credit where credit is due. I love my little intro that I made, and that very cool spacey music was courtesy of my very good friend and musician, Nick DiMatteo. And I think that kind of slides into what we're talking about, credit, and what this strike is all about and how important it is. So for everybody that is in the live chat, I am going to ask you to keep your questions specific to either SAG-AFTRA or United We Trek. This is not the time or place to be asking about Dr. Phlox or Hugh. We're all going to save that for another time, I promise, once the strike is over. But today it's all about SAG-AFTRA and United We Trek. And so without further ado, allow me to introduce my very special guests, Natalia Castellanos and Jonathan Del Arco, and the one and only John Billingsley, who for some reason is dark. Oh my gosh. John, where'd you go?
I don't know. This has been my... Where did I go? Heavens. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We just can't see your beautiful face.
Well, you'll just have to live without that, I guess, because I don't know what's happened. Let me describe to you. I'm roughly hewn. I'm unshaven. I'm looking particularly butch today. Let that be the image you have in your mind as we move forward. Because I don't know what's going on.
Did you hit your little camera button?
No.
Oh.
Well, wait a second here.
Yay!
Okay. Now I've given the lie to everything I just said. I'm just an old fat character actor, as you remembered me. Oh, well.
But that's what we love about you, John.
Yes. Yes, my brutal candor.
Yes, always. Your brutal candor and the F-bombs you usually drop in an interview after 5 seconds.
I'm going to be very fucking good today.
You're always fucking good. That's what we love about you.
All right.
All right. So let's talk about, I guess we can just start with the very simple, because I've seen a lot of people online and they don't get it. They do not understand why you guys are on strike. So Why don't we just start with why the strike?
Absolutely. So, we're on strike for many different reasons, right? But the main few reasons that we're on strike is we're looking for better compensation on our minimum wages. We need an increase in there to include inflation. We are looking for coverage and revenue sharing on top of our residuals for streaming, because most people don't understand. But streaming, when you see all your favorite shows on streaming, we, the actors and the writers, do not get paid on those shows. So you're seeing our faces and our likeness all over, but we're not getting any money. Sometimes we'll get a 1-cent check for that. Healthcare is huge, because out of our 160,000 members that we have in SAG-AFTRA, 86% of us do not qualify for health insurance. And the way we qualify is not only the days that we work, which are called session payments, but also between our jobs, where sometimes our jobs can come a month later, a year later, 2 years later. And those are all residuals, so that every time you see our shows and our face and our likeness, we're at least monetizing and getting compensated on that. And of course, the existential threat of AI, where they want the AMPTP companies want to pay us for half a day and use our likeness and our voice and our image to put in their franchises without compensation, without giving us, the ability to say whether we want to or not. So all of that is pretty much in a nutshell of what we are fighting for. And it ripples further than that into just the labor movement.
Right.
We're all labor workers.
Well,
Could I jump in, Steph, and just say one thing? I think what's tricky is because most people have a job that they go to every day, every week, every month, every year, and they're used to a regular paycheck. That's how they live. That's how they can project their income and their outflow. We don't have regular jobs. I might work 2 or 3 times a year, and I'll get a check, but it's not going to be enough to carry me. What the connective tissue is that allows me to survive, that allows most of the 160,000 people in our union to survive, the great majority of whom are middle to lower middle class, is the residual stream. That's why residuals were created. If there weren't residuals, most of us would not be able to stay in this business. What's happened over the last 40 years is every time we have a contract in which we are promised that we will get paid decent residuals if this new medium, this new mechanism for delivering product works, is it works, and then the next contract they say, oh, new delivery mechanism, we're going to give you a little bit of a lowball offer because we don't know if this is going to work. For 40 years, we've seen the amount of residuals we make diminish and diminish and diminish to the point where, as Natalia said, 80% or more of the people in our union don't make enough in a given year to even get health care, much less being able to afford to live in Los Angeles. That's really a fundamental bottom line issue. Streaming does not work for the creative class, and it needs to be fixed.
right. And I think, let me just jump in, because I think what really drove the point home for me when you guys were talking about how important it is with AI and how scary it can be, the Flash movie is a perfect example. And I admit, one of the big reasons I went to see it was because I got to see Christopher Reeve one more time on the screen as Superman. It was beautiful. It was perfect, which makes it scary that companies can do this with anybody for any reason. And I think if you're wondering about, that side of things, that's something that needs to be addressed.
And we're not asking for there to be no AI.
Right,
We're
of
asking
course,
it to
of
be
course.
managed, and really we're talking about an ecosystem in which we are treated as equal partners. And this
Right.
is what the WGA is asking for too. We want to be in on the conversation by which we collectively determine a functioning ecosystem. That's what Star Trek is supposed to be about. We're all in it together. We're all working for a better future for all of us. And right now, we're being treated as if we're gig employees and not partners in an enterprise. No pun intended.
No, and that makes sense. I mean, where would the studios be without the talent?
Yeah.
They would just be a bunch of empty buildings collecting dust.
Yeah.
I'm wondering,
And-
just before we get too much farther in, if we could just kind of pitch United We Track 2, and Jonathan, maybe tell us what it is we are doing on the 8th and why we're here.
Sure. Well, September 8th has long been a day that the fandom and the artists come together to celebrate this franchise. Of course, it's also a day the studio capitalizes and monetizes the franchise because they do very special events around it. And, business is business, art is art, fandom is fandom, right? Our event is about bringing the artists, the artisans, the crews, the human beings that create this franchise and the fandom together to stand outside the gates of the corporate bosses and remind them that they don't have sole ownership of this franchise. This franchise belongs to the fans and the people that actually create it. And that we are all a part, as John says, of the ecosystem that keeps entertainment going. Like you said, without the artists, it would be empty buildings. I dare say no one is going to a convention to get the autograph from the CEO of Paramount. I don't even know who that is, to be honest with you. So, it's just a gentle reminder, maybe not so gentle, a very obvious reminder to the bosses that the fans are watching. The fans that saved this franchise in the 60s, the fans that maintained the franchise. To be honest, the fans that have subsidized mine and John's and hundreds of other Trek actors' incomes by buying our autographs and buying our pictures and coming to. Without those conventions, you guys, I would not have a home. I would not be able to have lived as an actor without the fan support. So why not turn to the fans now for their support? We know they want to be a part of it. I've gotten private texts from fandom saying, what can I do? Should I cancel my subscription? I'm behind you. So this is an opportunity to invite them and let them be a part of our picket.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, and I know especially for me because I don't live that far from New York City, I'm planning on going to New York on Friday. I've already made arrangements. I'm getting up at 5:30 in the morning and I'm getting in my car and I am going to New York.
I love it.
Oh, I love it.
Because I have been looking for a way besides retweeting and reposting and hashtagging. I've been looking for a way to support this. And it never even occurred to me that fans could become a part of the picket. And you're right. I think it's important. I think you guys are getting a little ignored. The fact that they're doing a Star Trek Day celebration. I feel like you guys are being ignored, and I think that's just part and parcel of what you're striking against.
One of the things we kind of want to do above and beyond this franchise is to say pickets are not capped attendance-wise. They're not events. There are no microphones, there are no podiums, there are no speeches. It's a moving picket. If fans want to come and support us on the picket line, come support us on the picket line. And that extends to fans of other shows and other franchises. I think one of the things we really want to do is say one of the things that may bring AMPTP back to the negotiating table is a growing recognition that it is the fans who are saying, you're not on the side of the angels, you're the black hats in this morality play. And that's one of the things that we want to continue to ask fans to do to help us provide that leverage. Again, come back to the negotiating table. They haven't, once they walked away, they haven't said boo to us in the last month or so.
Wow. See, I mean, I didn't even know. So there's not even you guys aren't even sitting at the table right now.
No.
Nope.
So like as part of the negotiating committee, we have weekly meetings within ourselves, right? To talk about what's happening and strategies and different things that we have to think about. But they have not wanted to sit down with us at all. They have not reached out or given us a signal to say, yes, we're ready to come back to the table. So right now, as we know, they've been sitting with the writers, which is great, finally. But even that, it's still, they haven't made moves. They haven't switched. Their playbook is the exact same playbook that they've had years prior when everything has shifted, when they changed how the distribution model functioned, and we're still working on 40-year-old contracts. That just doesn't make any sense. They have to make a huge switch.
Yeah, it's just the old stuff doesn't work anymore. I mean, it's oh gosh, I can't think of that.
Well, and the new stuff doesn't either. That's the problem, is when they went to an all-streaming model and they eliminated advertising and they said, hey, our revenue is going to come from subscription, they basically chose to shrink their own pie and then turn to us and say, you guys have to bear the brunt of the suffering.
Right.
And we are fighting, in that sense, an existential fight for the existence of the entertainment industry. If you have 160,000 SAG actors and you say 80% of you're not going to be able to make enough money to survive, to get a house, to pay a mortgage, to put food on your table, you decimate our industry. And that's what I don't think they are prepared to really recognize.
And honestly, I think, unfortunately, a lot of the fans don't recognize that either. John, you and I have had private conversations when we run into each other.
So let me ask this as an intellectual exercise. Go to IMDb. For those of you who are watching or listening, go to IMDb and call up season 3 of any of your favorite iterations of the franchise and look at the cast list for every episode of that season. You'll see that there are 7 series regulars. Everybody else is a recurring, a guest star, a co-star, or a day player. Hundreds of actors who maybe got 1 check or 2, not huge, for their appearances in that season. If you want to only have the high-powered, mucky-muck actors, and I'm lucky enough to have briefly been one of them, that's not an industry. Hey, every episode would be a bottle show with 7 actors talking to themselves.
Right.
It's an ecosystem. And the people that you're not recognizing, that you wouldn't necessarily know by name or even maybe know if you bumped into them at a cocktail party, they're the backbone of this industry.
And I mean, that's represented mostly on that. I guess I'm allowed to say names. You guys aren't. But Deep Space Nine. I mean, that illustrates it perfectly because they had to have the promenade populated every episode. Could you imagine if it was just the core actors? I mean,
yeah.
Or any movie. Go watch Casablanca and imagine what Rick's place is like with just Rick.
Yeah. And just to put a little more perspective on what actors do on a daily, right? Because I think it's very important, like we've said, if you go to a job 9 to 5 every day, right? You know exactly what to expect, what you're doing. For one role, for somebody literally just saying, "Excuse me, Captain," for example, that role would have gotten at least 5,000 submissions for it. Now, out of 5,000 people that were submitted for that role, maybe 100 were seen or 80 were seen. And then out of them, only one got it. So let's think about everybody else that had the opportunity or not have the opportunity to work. They're not making the money. So when we do get on these shows, because it's already so hard, we are just asking to be paid fairly because now our faces and our likeness and our voice is going to be everywhere. And
Right.
all we need is compensation for it.
It is another issue that has come up, though, and I think it's important to say, is that back in the day, we used to go in and audition in person. They could only see so many people in person. So your odds were actually better that when you audition, you could get a job. Now you submit by tape. You put yourself on tape, and you have no idea whether or not hundreds of people are being seen for the same role. So oddly, our workload has increased, whereas our castability, the likelihood of our being cast, has diminished. And that
Right.
is an issue we're trying to deal with.
And,
Well-
and the preparation for these auditions has also changed because once when you used to go into a room, you could have a script in your hand. When you're on film, you're taping yourself. Not only does it cost money to put yourself on film, to pay someone to come read with you, etc., but you're also you have to be off book. You have to learn these lines. So that becomes an unpaid part of your job. Just trying to get the job becomes an unpaid part of your job.
Right.
So,
And insofar as the technical requirement has been put on our shoulders, I'm 63 years old. I can barely tie my shoelaces. Now I have to make little mini movies. I know that there are people who have mad tech skills who are able to put forward project, quality work that is going to leave me in the dust. There is something that is askew, and it's part of this whole gig economy mentality. You put more and more and more and more and more burden on your employee while simultaneously making sure that they're not really your employee. They're just hired in piecework.
Well,
The labor quandary we're facing in America.
Yeah. And, I will say this, the first time I ever saw William Shatner on stage, and we're talking eons ago, somebody asked him, if he ever regretted anything he ever did. I mean, let's face it, killer spiders, and he said no. And the reason he said no is he says, I don't understand people that turn down work. He said, acting is a part-time job because no matter what you get, it's finite. And then you never know where your next paycheck is coming from. And he said everything that he'd ever done, put food on his table and, help put his kids through school and everything else. So I think that's another thing that people don't understand is for every show that you get, it's going to end. And that means you're just right back at it all over again, trying to figure out where your next paycheck's coming from.
Well, and even worse now, Stephanie, like now we used to see 22 episodes of shows, right? Where our lifelong was, our career for a show could be healthy. I could be making a living and qualifying for health insurance, which is, by the way, $26,470 to qualify for the SAG-AFTRA health insurance. And 86% of our members don't qualify. But now they have limited series where it's 4 episodes, 6 episodes, 8 episodes, and maybe it only lasts until 3 seasons. Now, what they're doing to get around that is now they're training the world to think of limited series. And now our shows that would go into syndication are just not happening anymore. So again, we're losing money because now our shows are not going into syndication.
And somebody who might have been considered a series regular, they're finding ways to define that contract differently. So now we are perhaps considered recurring guest stars. They still want the same level of commitment, which makes it difficult for us to go out and get other work while reducing the paycheck. So these are all the pressures that are kind of coming together to make it imperative for us to say enough.
Right.
I want to highlight what Natalia just said in case it gets lost on anyone, because you were talking about insurance. What is the sort of like the lead of that comment is that 85% of members of our union that is probably close to 100,000 members
Mm-hmm.
or more, make
Whoops.
Oh, I'll tell them make less.
less.
Go for it. No, you skipped.
Make less than $26,000 a year.
Right.
So,
Well,
so to disavow anyone of the idea that actors are millionaires,
right.
if 86% of us make less than $26,000 a year, I dare say I could make more money at Starbucks. And
Yeah, exactly.
And to qualify that only a little bit, one of the things that makes it complicated is sometimes people will make more than $26,000 a year, but not every dollar you make from a residual counts towards your health.
Wow.
Yeah.
And there are interesting, little stipulations.
Oh God.
Feelings on
It's
how
like
much.
The fine print that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
this goes like with what John was just saying, just to, go a little deeper in that, is there are caps for a half-hour show, which are comedies, and hour shows. There are caps. So once they hit that cap, I'm going to throw out a dumb number. Please don't quote me on a number, but $100, let's just say, right? On these, once you make $100 on this episode, they're not adding anything on top of that for health and pension. So you're only making health and pension out of $100.
Yeah.
And again, that's a fake number. That's
Right.
not the number, but
Yeah.
right. And so those numbers haven't changed in 40 years.
Well, I just wanted to share some of the comments. Tiffany, who lives in Canada, who is an incredibly talented costumer. She is behind you guys 100%. One of her other comments is she wishes she could get down to LA for Friday. And Mars has an interesting comment as well. Back to what you were saying about investing your careers.
Mm-hmm.
You should be compensated for your outlay.
Yeah.
For your investments.
Yeah, right. And most people are willing to make an investment in their career and forestall making money in their early days against the possibility that they'll be able to make more money later on. If you didn't believe that you could grow your career commensurate as you aged, I was a theater actor until I was almost 38 years old. Right. I didn't have a pot to piss in. But eventually, moving to Hollywood and being able to work, I came into my lucrative years. If you take away the possibility of having lucrative years, you take away an inducement to go into the arts in the first place.
Right. Well, I mean, let's use Bonnie Gordon as like the perfect example. She is stinking talented out the wazoo, and she still has to work other jobs just to finance her passion, because her passion is her singing and her acting. But
and think about it, right? Like if you're in a 9-to-5 business job and you might be a manager and you want to get to be a senior director or a senior VP or something, you would think that, and it happens, as you go up the ranks, you're making more money to survive. Right now, our members, like both John and Jonathan, right, that we're different ages here, they could possibly be making the same that they've been making for years, from years ago, and not getting compensated for all the work and all the
there's no seniority.
There's no seniority in that. And they've put in years of it.
And you accept the fact that, given a business like ours, where so much is based on personal presentation, it's an ageist business, in many respects a sexist business. There are certain things that you kind of have to accept to go into this business. You do the best you can to fight against as an artist. But to have on top of those burdens the burden of a financial structure and a corporate business structure that is fundamentally geared towards making it difficult to earn a living, it really reached a sort of point of crisis. We are more unified, and I've been I joined Equity when I was 18 years old. I'm 63. So I've been a union member for 45 years. I have never seen this level of unity. And the AMPTP is making a serious misjudgment if they think we are going to back away from what to us is a survive question.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that they take you for granted. I think it's that simple. I mean, it's a very complex in all the ways that they do it, but the fact that they're so blind, even now, I mean, the fall television season has been pushed back because a lot of things aren't being filmed, and yet they're still not willing to come to the table. Boggles my mind.
Warner Brothers just reported this morning $300 to $500 million in income. They're willing to lose that rather than make a deal with us for a lot less money.
And something that we've been pointing out, if you have, and you know, it's a reflection. Something I'd like to keep talking about is the nature of the fact that we, as a labor union, are one of many labor unions in this country, and it's a fight that consumes all of us and should consume all of us as citizens of a country where people are losing purchasing power because unions need to be stronger. But one of the things I'd really like to point to is if you have a portfolio, if you are at all invested, even if it's a small 401k, consider you probably own stock in Apple or Disney or Netflix. Reach out, you're a shareholder, and raise your hand and say, this is bullshit. To Jonathan's point, you're prepared to take big losses and endanger the entire integrity of at least one of the signature arms of your business. For what reason?
Just, I almost want to say that it's childish. Like they're putting their foot down, like, we don't want to change. This is what we want to do. And we're going to take our ball and go home.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a disservice not only to you, but to us as fans. And I think that United We Trek is hopefully going to help make that point and make some sort of dent, because now it's not just the actors. Now the fans are being asked to make their voices heard as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and we really wanted to speak as people who are committed and passionate about the philosophy.
Right.
I mean, the idea that the folks who are producing Star Trek Day are producing it as corporatists, when the very ethos is predicated on a kind of collectivist and universality of spirit and collaboration that they are themselves denying in their own business model. That's really one of the things we really want the actors to appreciate, the writers to appreciate, the fans to appreciate. Our unity and our speaking to the values of this franchise has power. And, you know, people can spread that word and spread that message. That'd be great.
Right. And speaking of, I just, the dates and time, everything's happening this Friday. In both LA and New York, and you will see at the bottom of the page if you're anywhere within driving distance. Or hell, you know, at one point we weren't sure if New York was going to happen. I was like, I would have gotten on a plane for you guys. Just I really felt like I wanted to be involved. So I'm really glad I don't have to do that.
or spread the word, or pick up the phone and make a phone call to, you know, any of the studios. I mean, honestly, it is fan pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And we know from the history of this franchise what a difference fan pressure makes. Right. It's the reason the franchise survived.
And, you know, it comes down to consumerism. You guys aren't the ones opening your wallets to buy the T-shirts, to go to the conventions, to do all that. We are. Mm-hmm. And I think once the fans start talking, you know, and hopefully they'll start to see, it's like, well, you know, I know nobody has said anything about canceling their subscriptions or boycotting any of the streaming services, but if the fans get upset enough, you know, they're going to start doing it on their own.
Perversely, yeah, I honestly think we have more concern about the ecosystem sometimes than the bosses do. We don't necessarily want people to destroy, you know, the business model. We want the business model to be improved. So there's a reason our union is not asking people to cancel subscriptions. We're asking the people who run the business to recognize that everybody is in it together.
And I think,
come back to the table.
Yeah. And I think even just writing letters, right? We know how powerful writing letters, you know, is. And just writing letters to not only Paramount, but to any of the CEOs from any of these companies, to the importance of the fight that we're seeing here now, because we are more known faces than maybe some a different working group, right? Like UPS, we don't really know the faces of the UPS drivers, but they're in the same fight. This is a labor fight. This is something that is so much bigger than just the writers and the actors and the producers. This is about the small businesses, about you, me, anybody that gets affected by having production in their town. Hotels, restaurants, dry cleaners, all of that, I think, is very important. So letter writing is something that, you know, we also suggest for people to do.
Right. And it's so much, I mean, it's so much easier to do that today because a letter could be an email. So it's just, it's so much easier. You don't even have to leave your house to do it anymore. You just need to find that email address and just start, you know, and it saved Star Trek. Well, none of us would be here without a letter writing campaign.
And once
So-
upon a time in America, you know, a third of the American labor force belonged to a union. And that was a time when people had defined benefit pensions, and they had health care, and they had a higher standard of living than we have now. And in part, it's because of the erosions caused by globalization, but in part, it's because of political decisions that were designed to erode the ability of labor to organize and fight for better working conditions. 8-hour days, time and a half, paid vacation, health care, everything we take for granted was fought for. People died for our labor rights. So even though we're actors, and it may not seem, you know, the same kind of, may not seem like the same kind of fight as the people who stand there and, you know, face billy clubs. Anybody in a union who is fighting today for their own union membership is fighting for the rights of labor across the country and across the world. And yesterday was Labor Day.
Yeah.
You know, it
Yes.
means something.
It does.
And AI affects all of us. AI has already affected supermarkets and our big department stores that have self-checkouts, right? They've replaced a worker there. So AI is a fight for everybody. And all we're asking for is compensation and, you know, and being able and to give consent over that. We're not saying get rid of that. Yeah, guardrails on it.
Well, you know, it's funny. I'm back to when I was in school, which actually wasn't that long ago because I went back in my adult years. But some of my favorite classes were my communication law classes. And one of the things I learned is that you can't use, like, if somebody put one of your pictures somewhere to hawk a product, you could immediately say, take it down. I didn't give you permission. You cannot use my image in a print ad, in a billboard, anything. But yet now AI's come along and somehow that doesn't fall under the same, you know, rules. And that doesn't make any sense to me because it's even worse.
Yeah. And we're also, you know, not only the union fighting for AI guardrails and protections, but it's going beyond that, right? It's going to Washington because these are a lot. This has to do, I keep referring to this show. It's on Netflix. But go watch Black Mirror, right? Where you can see one of the episodes, literally it's called Streamberry, is taking your right to consent and to AI your likeness and everything. It's such an interesting thing. And that's kind of what is happening right now, is they're trying to use our likeness and everything without us giving consent.
And without sounding like a Luddite, I suspect that many of us also really wonder whether or not there's that much value in living in a world in which you can't speak to a person when you get on the phone. You know, I mean, how many of us struggle with the reality of no customer service representatives? Imagine a world in which, you know, all the truck drivers are actually it's self-driving. Not only do we lose this labor force, which continues to erode our mass standard of living, but frankly, people want to engage with people. That's one of the things that provides connective tissue in this universe. That's why we are a species that comes together. If we start an anti-civilization project in which people are led forever and ever and ever further apart by the introduction of AI technology, I think we lose the forest for the trees of what makes us a species.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's another thing that people are losing sight of is, again, because people don't understand, is that they see you guys, oh, the actors, the millionaire actors doing all this to get an extra whatever. But this fight really does have much broader reach and a much broader impact because, like you said, AI is everywhere. I mean, school kids are using AI and what is that, Chat GPT, to cheat, basically.
Right.
You know, why we don't want, you know, it's so funny. I used to work on Fiverr.com, which, I don't know, for those of you that aren't familiar, it's a gig site. And I'm a copywriter on some level. And somebody actually came to me and was like, well, I need you to create a PowerPoint presentation. I've got a school assignment. Like, it's a school assignment. You're supposed to do your own damn work.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I'm going to pay. I'm like, no, I'm like, no, you can go find somebody else. But back when I was in school, that's cheating. You don't ask somebody else to do your work for you. And we don't want to raise the next generation of people that just think that everything's going to get handed to them because they've got a computer to do it all. I mean,
yeah. And I think, you know, there's pluses and minuses to this AI thing, right?
Right.
Because it might help us save a life that I think it already has. It might help us get, find a cure for a lot of these, sicknesses that we go through. It might help us in that, but help is what the key word is in there, right? We don't want it to take over and erase us. We want to be part of it. And we also have to have control over that, not just these 1% of a corporation that then decides what to do with it.
Yeah, it's about autonomy. I mean, everybody deserves to have the right over themselves.
Mhm.
And
collaboration, which is federation. Which
Yeah.
is, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, it's supposed to be a partnership.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you got a bunch of empty buildings.
Yeah.
Back to that. And again, I'm just very surprised that it's gone on this long, that they haven't seen the value of what, what this strike is costing them. I mean, why?
Think at this point, it's an egos thing. My impression is that at this point, I think there's a consensus that they want this to be over, but you're talking about corporate heads that get paid a lot of money and have a lot of very wounded egos right now because they've lost the PR fight. You could read any article or look at any poll right now. The polls and the consensus of Americans are on the worker side. And you could see that in the articles that you're reading, and these big corporate heads are butthurt over it. I think.
But but Barry Diller the other day made a very interesting and astute point, which is that the business model for Paramount is different than the business model for Netflix.
Right.
Once upon a time, we had something called, antitrust laws that basically stopped vertical integration. The movie studios were not allowed to own the movie theaters. Well, we now have Amazon, which makes product and distributes product, and that is, candidly, a violation of what used to be an antitrust law.
Right.
The AMPTP is itself an odd amalgamation of businesses with different business models facing their own difficult set of existential questions. And I think one of the reasons that this is taking a long time is because I imagine in their room, they're having a lot of arguments.
Yeah.
Well,
John is completely right. Yeah, go for it, John.
I was going to say, look at what Taylor Swift just did to them. I don't know if anyone's read this, but she had a deal with the distributors, with AMC Theaters, to air her concerts. And of course, AMC Theaters took that deal, placed her film in prominent positions, and the studios are crying foul because she didn't go to them for distribution. So people are getting smart enough to realize that the studios are not necessarily the be-all, end-all of how to get content out.
Yeah. Right. And that's something else I wanted to ask about, because independent films are not part of what's being struck, correct?
No. So truly independent films, right? We give, as SAG-AFTRA, we give something called an interim agreement, which is an agreement. I know the press has called it a waiver. We're not waiving anything. They're literally agreeing to our last terms that we had across the table on July 12th. So they're agreeing to all of our provisions. And independence, the beautiful thing about that is that if independents can actually say yes to our deal, and if they're able to say yes to that, why can't the AMPTP do it? And another thing with that I do want to add is, when we're sitting across the table with the AMPTP are not actually the creatives. They are the money, the bean counters, right? That sit down with us. They don't understand really what we do. And you have not only the legacy companies, which have, like John was saying, a very different business model than the tech companies, right? The Netflixes of the world, they just do streaming. Then you have the Apple and the Amazons that they make a lot of their revenue from computers or sales of other things. And then you have the legacy companies like the ABCs, the CBSs, the Foxes, right? Like that have a very different structure. So what that causes, and they all have to agree to the same thing. What that's causing in the room for them, I can only imagine, because I'm obviously not the fly on the wall, is they can't agree because they're competing against each other.
Barry Diller said, "Hey, make separate deals. Some of the studios should separate from the AMPTP and strike their own deals as producers, strictly speaking, producers. Leave Netflix behind. And I don't know, I mean, on one level,
I bet that's what happens.
I think it's for what it's worth, as somebody who spent a lot of time, I was very interested in labor history growing up. I think it's really interesting to go back and remind ourselves of what labor unions had done and how hard the fight was and where we were not that long ago. Kids worked in mines. People worked 7 days a week. There were company stores. There were no protections, no health protections, no time and a half, no retirement. There was no Social Security. There was no Medicare. There was no social safety net. It's a relatively recent phenomenon in American and world history. And people who care about the future need to fight any way they can to fight corporations that do not have that as one of their. They worry about their bottom line and their investing class. They are not worried about the future of civilization.
Right. They've taken the human out of the equation when it comes to how they operate. And that just doesn't,
And labor unions have historically been the cutting edge of a fight for, a decent life, a decent world.
Right. Right. And again, back to the fact that people need to understand it's like 86% of actors aren't making a living wage, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And yet, you turn on Paramount Plus and I can see your faces whenever I click on something, whenever I want. You are on demand.
Yeah.
And the fact that you guys aren't being compensated properly for that makes no sense.
Yeah.
It defies logic. Mr. Spock would be raising his eyebrows right about now because it really doesn't make.
It makes sense for the bean counter logic.
Mm-hmm. Well,
it makes sense for the humanist logic.
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm going to be in New York bright and early. Still trying to figure out where the heck I want to park. I'm already starting to research. I love researching trips. But I am planning, like I said, I've already got off my day job and I am planning to be up there on the lines. I actually have a friend. I'm the one that did the music for my intro. He's also SAG. So he's going to be joining me.
Oh, good.
And so,
Jonathan, can you speak just to the details of the day and some things we want people to know in advance?
Yes. As far as in Los Angeles, we encourage you to take a Lyft or Uber or carpool if you can. Parking is at a premium around Paramount. Bring water, bring sunscreen, prepare for warm. We don't know how the weather will be. This is not a convention, so don't bring stuff to sign and pictures to take. It's not what the day is about. The day is not about cosplay. It's not about edifying the franchise. It's about joining in with the laborers outside the studio and marching together. Having said that, having been a part of these special pickets, they're great fun. I mean, there's a great sense of celebration when the community comes together. So I know if I was not an actor, I was just a Trek fan, which I am a Trek fan. I said it.
And we're live. I can't beep you.
Well, I'm a United We Trek fan. I would go. It sounds like a fun day to me. So that's what's happening in LA. In New York, it's a little earlier. I imagine it's going to be very similar, though. SAG is not picketing that day. It's the WGA is running that picket, taking a cue from what we started here. SAG workers are going to be counting votes for our election that day in New York. But it's going to be just as fun. I know a lot of phenomenal actors coming to both of those events. I know a lot of great artisans and people from the crews, from the shows are going to be there. So it's going to be a very unique opportunity for the fans to experience.
Social media is good. So post, hashtag, let people know that you're out there.
Yeah.
It is. If you can't,
it is a picket.
I was saying,
so
if you can't come,
wear comfortable.
Sorry, John.
Yeah, no, it's a picket. So wear comfortable shoes. You don't have to stay the whole time, but you will be moving the whole time. That's one of the things that makes it possible to do this without any kind of a cap on attendance. We're not going to have any speeches, no microphones, no podiums. So it's really important that people kind of understand the spirit of it. And if you want to make your own sign, we only ask you to be kind of, considerate. Nothing that you would want, your mom to not, it's like,
Right.
And you'll get your steps in.
Yeah. Exactly. My watch will stop bugging me to move because I'm like, wait, you're moving.
Although somehow I've still gained weight. I don't understand.
Well, because of the ice cream trucks. I was just going to say, if you can't come, a great way to support the actors' families on strike right now is to go to SAG-AFTRA.Foundation. It's a nonprofit connected to the union that provides help for actors throughout the year, but they're completely flooded right now with need because people can't make their rent and can't put food on the table. There's a lot of struggling families right now in the industry, and so if you can contribute anything and you can't come, that's a good way to give back.
What was that website again?
It's SAG-AFTRA.Foundation.
Okay, so let's.
And just for everybody to, while they're there, to be respectful, to be, ready to have fun and join all of us together. I think that's super important, to know and be safe because, like, at least here in Los Angeles, the Paramount sidewalk is kind of slim and then there's a car right there. We want to make sure everybody is safe and stay on the sidewalk and not get hit by a car.
Yeah, and Broadway, 1515 Broadway in New York is a little crowded. It's Times Square-ish, so... again, I'm debating. There's plenty of parking lots. I might take the Staten Island ferry, however you get there. Obviously New York's got great public transportation, but let me ask you a question. If you can't, let's say you live in LA and you can't make it, but you want to go another time. Maybe you want to go and hand out water, or you want to go, that's something that you guys...
Well, yes, 100%. And when they get to any of the studios, whether New York or LA, we have gate captains who really have been the lifeline and lifeblood out on the picket lines. They do such great work to coordinate any of that. So just let them know. And, when you're there, and it's usually Monday through Friday.
And there are themed events every day. This is our themed event, but every day is a brick in the wall, Who knows, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, given all the different studios that are being picketed on both coasts, what kind of events might be taking place. So if you're interested in going out and supporting the pickets, and you're interested in maybe kind of tying yourself to a particular, it's the Breaking Bad picket, it's the yada yada picket, check that out is that posted?
Yes, that's the SAG-AFTRA strike.org. So if you go to SAG-AFTRAstrike.org, you're able to see the locations of every single picket. And if you go and it will have another link that says what are the special pickets in LA or New York, that will be. And if you don't live in LA or New York, I know that there are some rallies that are other locals because this is a national contract. This is a national issue. This is not just in LA and New York. It's just the studios are over here. So that's where it is. But whether you're in Chicago or Philadelphia or Atlanta, Florida, Texas, they're all having rallies different times. And you could also just check that out.
The other thing I want to throw in, Michelle Hurd and the other members of SAG that made it possible for these conventions to happen and made it possible for actors to attend the conventions. If you are thinking about going to a convention that's coming up, or but you're like, well, they can't talk about this, they can't go. Support the actors, buy a selfie, buy an autograph, even if it's not a character picture, because this is supporting the actors themselves. And go and ask questions. I know a lot of people thought, there were some people that had some negative things to say about STLV, but mostly it was positive. People enjoyed the fact that the questions weren't the same questions that get asked over the last 50 plus years. There were questions about the craft and general questions and what did you do on your vacation or whatever it was. So any of the upcoming conventions that are happening, if they're happening near you and you're thinking about going, please go.
I give a prize to the person who asks the most embarrassing question.
And those never have anything to do with Star Trek. Never.
Rarely do they. I also don't get invited to conventions anymore. So
did I tell you, John, I actually got in trouble. I worked the last official Trek convention in New Jersey. You and I had chatted, and this was the first time, and I was working there, and I was working the microphone for the questions, and you came up on stage and you said that, and I laughed out loud and I got yelled at because they're like, you're not allowed to say anything. Because I was in charge of the mic, so I was in charge of making sure people didn't touch it and that they only got one question and whatever. But because I was working, but I was laughing at half of the things you were saying. One of the people came out and tapped
What
me.
about the other half? You're saying half of my material stinks.
No, half of your material wasn't comedy.
Oh, yeah, that's true. If a serious question is asked, I do have to give a serious response.
Yes, exactly. But I was laughing at you, and I got in trouble for laughing at you because
I'm
no,
sorry.
Don't be sorry. I stopped. I just decided attending is much more fun than working for creation because then I can sit and laugh at everything that you say, and I get to wander around. But I digress. So so please, if there's a convention, obviously, just go and get a selfie. $20, $30, whatever. Everything is helping now.
And I would say even go to the theater. We're not telling people not to go to the theater. Go support theaters, right? They're not owned by the AMPTP. I know that the product is, but you're also supporting the ecosystem of what theater is, and so that we also get to see more, right? So there is a film out there that is the very first Latino superhero movie, right?
Oh,
something that we've
Blue
never.
Beetle.
There you go.
Blue Beetle.
I wasn't going to say it, but something that that has never happened. That shows the studios that these stories are also important.
Right.
So let's support the creative process in that way as much as possible.
Yeah, it's funny that you said that because with all the controversy that surrounded the actor who played the Flash, I'm not even going to mention their name. I still, people are like, I'm not going to, like I've said before, I went to go see it because of the Christopher Reeve thing. But besides that person had already gotten their check. So again, I was supporting the ecosystem. It was something I wanted to see on the big screen. It was important to the ecosystem that I went and saw it. So I put that aside and I went and saw it on the big screen. So now it's even more important, like you said, to do that and to think, I think, before you decide what you're going to do to support the strike. Because like you said, there are people that want to do A, B, or C, but maybe that's not really supporting the ecosystem.
Jonathan made the point that the AMPTP has lost the PR war.
Mm-hmm.
But every day is another day in the battle. You never win until it's over. So I would say that PR front, that the nature of the voice, the public voice that says back to the bargaining table, make this happen. I cannot stress enough how important it is for people who are listening, who care, to speak up, to just keep speaking up.
Yeah, because obviously they're not listening. They should be listening to you. They're not.
Well, I think the more we can help. I mean, again, we're just small people doing small things. It's a brick in the wall, a brick in the wall, a brick in the wall. But to the best extent that we can in our small way, encourage people to keep adding their voice to the conversation. I do think the fan voice is maybe still a voice that could be heard a bit more.
Yeah, and like I said, that leans more towards their pocketbooks. That's speaking more their language when the fandom chimes in.
Well, it's a customer base.
Exactly, because they're not. Yeah, because you have to. You have to hit them where it hurts.
Yeah.
And the wallets are where it hurts.
Yeah.
And we need to retrain them how we want to watch stuff, right? We need to retrain them that we want to see more episodes of shows, not just 8 episodes and done. I can't tell you how many shows I watch now that I'm like, really? That's all I got? And that's all that's ever going to be out there?
Yeah, 2 years to watch the next 8.
Yeah.
I know. It's so funny when I go back and watch some of my favorite shows from, the 80s and the 90s that are now available. And it's like you're going through a season and it's like, you're episode 19, episode 20, and it's just like, this is so cool.
We may also, and I'm going to say something that I find tricky to say, because, sometimes the idea of the consumer is always right. Well, we have eliminated advertising as part of the revenue, pool. To a certain extent, one of the things we've done is in saying, this happened in the journalism industry too. All news is free all the time. Well, then newspapers die. To a certain extent, by saying all programming is advertising free, we actually have limited the amount of income that comes into the model, into the structure. Right. That's one of the things that I think we are going to have to look at. And maybe that's a dual subscription track where somebody pays more to not have ads,
right,
and somebody pays less to have ads. But we have to increase the revenue coming into this organism too.
Right.
And that's a, you know, a harder thing maybe to say to fans and consumers, but there's no such thing as a free lunch in this universe.
No, there's not. And I'm fine sitting through some commercials if it means that I'm going to watch a show that I enjoy.
Yeah.
You know, because I mean, listen, I grew up watching commercials. I lived my life before VCRs. You know, I was there watching TV going, you know, bathroom. I mean, the MASH, remember the MASH series finale? You know, the commercial breaks were when everybody ran to the bathroom, and you know,
well, and if you
that whole story about.
I'm probably the only one old enough, maybe Jonathan too, to remember when the newspaper was this thick.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Full of ads.
Yeah, if it hit you in the head, you could have gotten a concussion.
And those ads paid for coverage. And one of the things, just to digress, that we've lost is because with the newspapers now this thick, we don't have coverage of cities and municipalities, which means the people who run them are allowed to be corrupt because there's no eyeball.
Right.
And
there's no accountability.
It's another illustration of an ecosystem that has not, everybody coming together has been out for their own interests, and consequently the ecosystem has been despoiled. Weirdly, I think about our business in an ecological way, because you see it all over the globe, is the ecosystems get despoiled because people are selfish.
Well, it is an organic system, so.
Yeah. We should probably get going because, believe it or not, you would think you would make our day, but we have one more conversation.
I'm hurt. I'm hurt, but it's so important for you guys to be everywhere today.
This will be our commercial break, pee break. Run.
So please, everybody, share this video, share the information. Let's unite and trek.
Yeah, and join us.
Absolutely. And join us. And I will be in New York helping out. If you can make it, make it. If you can't, we've just given you so many other ways that you can support the strike. So everybody, thank you for tuning in. Thank you to my very special guests for this wonderful hour. And I will be back with you for my actual season premiere, which is happening on September 25th. So thank you all again for tuning in. Thank you guys for joining me. And as always, everybody, please live long and prosper.